Hi everybody, Scott Beaumont here, and there's a great topic at the moment about Rory McIlroy, and I want to try and help everyone understand why he's got excessive recoiling of the hips. It's overall pretty good, however, the excessive recoiling is to do with a breakdown in how he applies shear force to the ground with his right foot, and there's a breakdown in his foot mechanics, and I'll explain that a little bit in a minute. But there's a combination of two things. It's a combination of applying force to the ground that causes this, and it's a combination of the rate of stretch and the rate of contraction of the muscles. Okay, so let's just explain that a little bit so you guys understand. Is that we've got vertical forces that go into the ground. Okay, so you've got vertical forces, or I call them normal forces. The other one is shear forces. Okay, and shear forces is when you push parallel along the surface of the ground. So you push in this direction, you push in that direction, and in that direction. Okay? And when you push along the surface of the ground in these directions, you essentially apply force in these directions, and the ground pushes back at you evenly, and it creates a torque coupling. So it's a combination of how you apply force to the ground downward and creating that torque coupling. Okay? I'm trying to keep this simple so you understand. So essentially what happens is that when you apply force to the ground, it makes the lower body rotate. And then what happens is when the ground pushes back at you, okay, it causes it to decelerate, plus the contraction of the muscle, it makes the lower body decelerate, it creates a little bit of counter-torquing. Essentially when you've got good lower body mechanics and a beautiful kinetic link, and when I train people, over a period of time you'll see the lower body accelerate, decelerate. Okay, so initially when the ground kicks back, it causes one deceleration, acceleration, deceleration phase. And then when the ground pushes back at you again, so it pushes back evenly, the hips go, they rotate back, and then this happens again. The hips rotate, and then when you get core bracing at impact, so the muscles brace, it causes the hips to re-decelerate again, and then it all takes off one through impact. I mean, it's complicated, and that would probably have to be another topic. It's really hard to explain. You know, it'd take a long time on video. So what happens with Rory? If you can see here, if I apply force along the ground evenly, and I try and push, and I apply the right force to the ground, so I push this way and this way, okay, and I apply force as hard as I can to the ground, and I'm applying as much force as I can to the right foot, okay, my body doesn't move. So as hard as I push back, you can see I go back a bit, but then the ground kicks in and knocks me that way. So if I push back, go back a little bit, ground pushes back, and I can apply more force. With Rory, what happens is because he's got a breakdown in his right foot mechanics, he loses the ability to apply shear force to maintain this force pushing this way, so the ground pushes back, so I can maintain force. So I create an equal opposite force reactions. Okay. So what happens with Rory is because he gets in a mechanical disadvantage with his right foot, he actually applies too much vertical force down to the ground, so it makes his hips accelerate. And because his shear forces are a little late, because he can't apply that shear force early enough in his golf swing to create this pattern, so I'm just getting a little bit confused. When he applies enough vertical force, what happens is when the ground finally kicks in, his pelvis is open a little bit more than what it should be. Okay? And then what happens is when the muscles finally contract, so when the ground finally pushes back at him and the muscles contract, it causes his hips it causes the hips to rotate backwards or recoil. The reason they recoil so much is because he's losing this force to apply to the ground. So if I put my foot up like this, and I try and push into the ground, can you see what happens? Now if I apply force to the ground, can you see how I can't do that? Take it off, again. So essentially what happens with Rory, it's two things, Rory. What happens is two things, is that, again, it's too much vertical forces, and the shear force is late, okay, so it applies that torque coupling, and it's a rate of contraction, okay? It's a rate of stretch to a rate of contraction. Okay, it's a velocity or it's a torque load in rotational. It's a amount of velocity to the muscle, and he contracts it because this is contracting so hard, and because he pushes so hard this way, and he's not creating an equal amount of force applied that way, it makes his hips counter torque. So I hope that makes sense. You know, let me know if it's not, and I can try and explain it more. So just to recap, that's Rory not applying enough force. when he applies enough force, it doesn't occur. So again, it's just the rate of contraction, and it's the shear forces being a little bit late. So his vertical forces kick in before his shear forces. If he fixed up his foot mechanics and he applied shear forces earlier, when that does counter torque and he's got force, it wouldn't counter torque on him. Okay, don't just do that. Okay, and then take off again. It wouldn't be so visual. So anyway, guys, I hope that helps you understand what happens with Rory. If this does make sense, let me know and I can try and redo it. It really is hard to try and explain in an easy, digestible manner so people understand. I'll try to keep the science out of it, just so you guys get a general understanding of why. You know, keeping it as simple as possible and in a manner that you can deliver it to others so we all understand. Okay then, thanks guys.